So if your bank account balance were to drop by 50% tomorrow, knock on wood, I don't have wood anywhere, but if that were to happen to you, would you still feel like a success? Take some time to think about it. How would you feel about yourself if your bank balance just dropped or your investment portfolio lost a significant amount of value? The honest answer for many of us is no. We would not feel good about ourselves. We've been conditioned to believe that our value is inherently tied to how successful we happen to be, or how successful our portfolios are, or how successful our marriages. But in this context, we realize that as long as our identity is tied to our money, we don't actually own wealth, it owns us. And that immediately sets up a control problem because we're no longer the ones in control. The wealth, the assets, the career, that thing that seems to define us is now in control. So today we are setting up to separate our identity from our net worth so that we can experience true sovereignty and we can actually deploy our wealth with more confidence. And I will share with you some more on that in just a minute. So, many high earners often feel like their success is a performance. And to be honest, I get it. I think all of us can understand that the success we go after, we wear it like a badge, we wear it like a tiara. It's a symbol to the world that we are somehow good, that we are okay, that we've made it. Our success seems to be what we show off to everyone and what they are supposed to use to define us. But that is not the way it's supposed to be. Because then, if that external metric fails, we start to think of ourselves as failures. If that performance fails, no longer is it, the actor was given bad lines or what have you. Suddenly, you take on the failure. So when we are performing for an audience in our lives, in the decisions that we're making with our money, all of a sudden, when the performance fails, suddenly it's not the asset that is the problem. We start to think that we are the problem. And it gets worse. We've been taught that smart people are good with money. So anytime we make a financial mistake, whether it's, from what we didn't know or whether it's just the circumstances around us, it feels like an actual character flaw for us, as opposed to what it really is, which is, a transaction data point. It's a moment in time. It's a lesson that we learned. We need to decouple our identity from our net worth. We need to reframe financial challenges. A loss in the market or a change in your career trajectory, a loss of a job, or even a business setback, that is a circumstance. That is a structural issue, as in the individual component might be faulty. It is not a personal identity crisis. We need to separate our identity from our net worth. You see, if you're building a house and you run into a problem with a material somewhere, or one of your contractors may have been messing around or something, you don't say, I'm a horrible builder. You don't run around telling people I do shoddy work. No, you understand that material was defective, or you understand that the contractor that you hired was not doing a great job. And what do? You correct it. You adjust it. You make the moves that need to be done so that the overall project continues moving forward and that you are still a successful builder. You're still a great homeowner, whatever the case may be. So, I want to give you three benefits of that detachment that I'm talking about. Three ways that you would benefit once you detached your identity, your sense of self from your assets. And these three I just love. First and foremost, when you're not so afraid to fail because it no longer reflects your identity, your self worth is no longer on the line, you can take some calculated risks. I think I say this, I've said this before, and I guess I'll say it again. Um, if I had made friends with failure sooner, I feel like I would be further ahead faster. I would have moved further ahead faster. But a fear of failing, because for me, failure was so tied to my identity, that fear of failure made it so that anything that looked even slightly risky, I avoided. Although they were calculated risks. Before we started with real estate investing, I remember, dabbling, and you hear all the talk about, people lose money, but you also heard about how people made money. Once I learned about investing, I was still attaching my identity to, the whether or not a project worked because it would be a reflection of me. Hadriana is horrible at real estate investing. And I think back to so many projects that I vetted, going through, working on the details. And the only reason that I didn't do it was because I was afraid of how I would look if it didn't work. And with every project, there is inherent risk, of course. But when we are not taking opportunities, leveraging these opportunities, because the fear of failure is just, it's going to mean something to who we are missing out big time. So detaching our sense of self from our finances allows us to take calculated risks. So you can pivot your career. You'll be all right. You can launch a venture. You can invest in a moonshot. Because a no from the market does not mean no to your value or your sense of self or even your self worth as a human. So that detachment allows us to say, I tried this, it didn't work. Okay, I'll try something else. We don't get to punish ourselves. And that kind of freedom can spell great rates of return for your portfolio once you learn the strategies, the techniques, and how to best leverage opportunities. So, first benefit, that freedom to experiment and take calculated risks. Another benefit is we can, when we are detached from, our sense of self from our money, you can actually finally use your money as a tool as opposed to something that has to do the job of ego work and personal self worth. You move from being controlled by the fear of loss to actually commanding your wealth to serve your mission and your vision. You move from the place where you're afraid to deploy money and then money or the lack of it, even too much of it is a fear sometimes for a lot of us. You let go of that. You're able to say, I am in command here. My money is not in control. And that is a wonderful experience for us, especially as women, where so many other aspects of our lives are being controlled, are being influenced by all these other people and things and systems that really we don't have much of a say in. We need to move from being controlled to being in command of our wealth so that it serves us. And the third benefit of that detachment is emotional resilience. This separation, it creates a buffer zone. You can actually navigate, market volatility, upswings, downswings, any sorts of shifts with a clarity that says, I am a CEO, rather than ending up with panic or that victim mentality. That emotional resilience allows there to be a buffer between who I am and the outcomes of the tasks that I deployed. That kind of buffer allows that whatever the experience is with all the things you tried, you did do, you didn't do, that succeeded, that didn't succeed, there is a nice little wall in between that protects you as a person of worth, as a person of value from the outcomes of all of the projects, all of the things that you decided to deploy your wealth to do. We have to accept the fact that deploying our wealth does not mean that everything we do will succeed. In fact, I hate to say it, but the failures that we have along the way, the missteps, the hiccups, the things that you didn't see, they are great stepping stones and learning lessons. And if we keep avoiding them, we don't move forward. We don't grow. We don't get to learn. We don't get to build up that resilience that we need emotionally, financially, experientially. We're missing out. Once we keep just avoiding any sense of failure, we're really doing ourselves a disservice. So, that emotional resilience is a great benefit of detachment. A failure in, a strategy does not trickle all the way down to saying a failure in me. And we need to make the shift. How do you make the shift? How do you initiate that detachment? First, I'd say, if you aren't your money, who are you? If you are not your career, who are you? If you are not that account balance in your portfolio, who are you? When I work with my clients, that is where we start with clarity and alignment. We need to have a great understanding of who we are because our core values, these are the permanent fixtures in our identity. What we value, that is the building block, the foundation. That is the thing that money cannot buy and a market crash cannot take it away. Who you are is not it's not a waved, it's not going back and forth based on, the title that you have at your job today. It is not dependent on, how the world looks at you when they look at maybe your resume. It is not dependent on the big number at the bottom of your net worth statement. Take some time and do a values discovery. Who are you? And what do you value? Get crystal clear about that. The next thing I'd say that will help you to initiate that shift is watch your words, man. Watch that language. Stop using terms or using phrases that say, I am broke or I am failing. Start saying, my current liquidity is X number of dollars. Or instead of saying to your friend, I can't do that because I'm broke, you can say, you know what? I have no money allocated for this right now. That is truth. You don't have money for that weekend away that all of your girlfriends might be talking about, but you might not be there. Money has been deployed to do other things. That's okay. That doesn't mean you're broke. That language is a shift that moves you from taking identity from your circumstance to just stating what is. It just happens to be the current status in this moment in time. So use your language intentionally so that you are not reinforcing identity claims based on status, based on where you happen to be at that time. And third, treat your personal finances like a board meeting. I mean, you're managing people within your roles at work. in your career, you are the one calling meetings and asking of your employees or of your staff, what has been happening. Give me a report in. Let's do a debrief. Treat it like a board meeting. You're not going to cry in the board meeting if a spreadsheet says, you're down 5% or you're down 20%. You'd look for a solution. Well, maybe you would cry. It depends. I don't know. Hormones do a lot of things. But once you get past that reaction, you go looking for a solution. That's when we become architects. We don't just drop the structure. We don't just give up and say, I'm horrible. We go looking for solutions. And that is how that wealth architect would operate. So, your wealth is a tool that you have been blessed to have at your disposal and to wield with intention and care, but it is not who you are. It is going to move. Your wealth is going to move based on what you value. When you realize that you are the one holding the pen, you're not the ink on the page, you're actually holding the pen, you gain a level of freedom that no amount of money can ever buy, and no amount of lack can ever take away. So, time for a separation. You are worthy. You have value, and you get to deploy your wealth the way that best suits you. Your wealth does not define you. You define your wealth. So until next time, thanks so much for joining me. You take care now.